Okay, this next demo is on getting started on the bike ad. So the first thing you want to do is download the bike ad from the bike ad folder from Blackboard. And if you open it up, all the files are floating. Then you want to make a copy of your project folder and rename it bike ad your last name. And then we want to move the files into the proper location. So we have a handout here that's going in the working folder. And Schwinn copy text also goes in the working. And the other last three are Photoshop files. So they're going to go in the raster folder. Okay, then you can toss this folder. And we have our proper file management set up. Next thing you want to do is take a look at the handout. And here it is. Now this one's different than the Chevy ad. On this one, you need to interpret these specs and execute. Okay, it's not going to give you step by step. And you should know what these things are. Okay, so we'll refer to this as we lay it out. Now the first thing we want to look at is the size of the document. We have an 8.5 by 5.5. It's going to be a single page. 1/4 inch margin, 2 columns, and a 0.2 gutter. So these are the 2 columns, and there's our 0.2 gutter. Okay, so then we have ruler guides. And you notice there are ruler guides at a 1/2 inch. These are vertical on both sides. And then we have horizontal ruler guides at 3/4 of an inch, 2 inches, 4.5, 4 3/4, and 5. So you want to set those up. So the first thing we want to do is make a new document. So go to InDesign and hit Command N. And as I said, we want to turn off facing pages. This is a single page document. The width is 8.5. The height is 5.5, 5.5. We'll tab through here. We have 2 columns. At 0.2 is our gutter. And now I'm going to tab down to the margins, which is going to be 0.25. And I can click on the little link here to get them all. No bleed on this, so this should be good to go. So here's our document. As I said, the first thing we want to do is set up our ruler guides so we can line up our images. So I'm going to drag a ruler guide over to a 1/2 inch. This is verticals. And another one over to 8 inches. Okay, and then from the top, horizontal, we want a ruler guide at 0.75, 3/4 of an inch. We want one at 2 inches. We want another guide at 4.5. A guide at 4 3/4. And a guide at 5 inches. Okay, back off a little bit. So take a look at our handout. First thing you want to do is set up these 2 red rules. Notice the first one is right on the edge of the document, and the second one goes on your 1/4 inch margin. And they're 4-point red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rectangle frame. You can do it anywhere on the page. And I'll go ahead and crank that up to 4 points. And I'm going to get my swatches. I'll go Window, Color, Swatches. And if we look at our fill and stroke, just like Illustrator, I'm going to click on Stroke so it comes forward and color that rule red. Okay. Now I'm going to use my reference point and my control panel to set the rest of this up. So I have my reference point in the upper left corner. We want this to go up into the corner, so that tells me my X and Y is going to be 0, tab 0. I'll tab again. Now I need my width, which is 8.5, tab again, 5.5, and hit return. And that sets our first roll up. Okay, now the second one, I'm just going to draw right on the 1/4 inch margin. Okay, crank that up to 4 points, and you can see it's red. Now, before I bring anything else in, this is where I want to bring in the old bike tip, this old bike here. And you want to bring that in first because if you start to put other stuff in here, they're going to be on top of it. And you want the other stuff to be on top of it. So that's the next step. So I have that selected. I'm going to hit Command D. Try that again, Command D. And I want to get the old bike EPS. And it drops them in there just like that. That works. You can see he's kind of bitmapped, so we're going to put that on high quality display. Display performance, high quality. Okay, and that looks good. Okay, we'll take a look at our handout again. So we've got our rules, and we have our old bike in there. Next thing is we want to work with this headline, and you notice it's 100 points times bold, and 2B is 36 point times bold italic. And notice there's a baseline shift on the W and the B. That's going to drop it below the baseline. The other thing here is notice the small caps and the big caps. We call these small caps or big caps, little caps. We'll be setting that up also. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a text box off to the right and hit Command D, and let me get that copy. Find that in the working folder. Schwinn copy text. Okay, and I want to cut Born to be Wild out of here. So I'm just going to highlight it and hit Command X. We'll go over here, and I'll make a text box in here for it. I'm going to make it bigger than it needs to be. And we'll hit Command V. There we go. And we're just going to highlight that. And first we'll go to the character part of our control panel. And this is times. So I'll just type in times. And there we go. There's times bold. Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is set up the 100 point for Born and Wild. So I'll just go in here. We don't have to worry about the leading because it's just a single line, headline. Okay, and then I'm going to highlight 2B, and take that down to 36 point, and make it bold italic. Okay, let's take a look at our invisibles, Option Command I. You can see the spaces here. All right, the next thing I want to do is set this up as the small caps, or we call big caps, little caps. It's real simple. I'm just going to highlight this, and right here it is, small caps. See, that turns our lowercase into smaller caps. I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, and now we want to take a look at our handout again. We're looking at the tracking here, minus 25. That is the space between the characters and the words. So we're going to do that. So get it selected. And we can do this on the character palette, Command T, or we can do it up here. So I'm going to go in here and make that minus 25. And that should fit in there pretty good. Okay, the next thing, take a look at the handout again, is this negative baseline shift, minus 20. That's going to drop the W and the B down below. So we'll do that. So I'm just going to highlight the W and looking for baseline shift. Here it is right here. You can also find it on your character palette. Going to do a minus 20. See, I'll drop that down where we want it. Do the same thing on the B. Okay, then I'll go to my selection tool, and I'm just going to nudge this text box up to the guide. There we go. Now, I'm going to apply that drop shadow to it. And if we look at our handout, it's telling us, there you go, Object Effects Drop Shadow on our headline. So, and if you remember from the demo, we don't want to be in our type tool when we apply drop shadow. It won't work. If we try it with the type tool, it'll be grayed out. Okay, can't get to it. So we want to have our selection tool and have it selected. And now we'll go Object, Effects, Drop Shadow. We're going to go, here's our drop shadow. And you can preview it. And we're going to put the blending on normal. And there's our drop shadow. Okay. Okay, so we're moving along. Take a look at our handout again. Next thing I'm going to do is I want to drop this image in here. And notice it gives me the X and Y, 1/2 inch, 2 inches. That's a 1/2 inch over, 2 inches down. And it tells us to scale it 104. It has to blow up just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and make a picture box for that. Rectangle frame. Okay, and we want our X and Y, it's going to be 0.5 and 2. That puts it in the right position. And let's look at the size again. And it just has to come all the way over. Okay, so, and it comes right to our column. So now I'll hit Command D. Activate it again, Command D. And I'm going to go back into our images and we get the speed bikes. Okay, and there it is. See, it needs to be blown up a little bit. So it says 104. We'll take a look at that. And I'll go ahead and adjust my X again to 1/2 inch, 0.5. And that should work for us, for the bikes. Should save this. Remember, always save every couple minutes. Put your last name on it. And we always float that in our folder. Once you get it saved the first time, you can just hit Command X every couple minutes after that. Okay, next we're looking at this copy on the right, so let's look at our handout. So I'm going to drop this in. It's 12 over 13.5 times. That means it's 12-point type, and the leading is 13.5. So here it is here. Basically what I'm going to do is draw a text box for it. And I'm going to take my type tool and highlight most of it. This guy going here. Let's move him out of the way. Make sure we get all of it. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to Command X, cut that, or I'll copy it. Command C, copy. And then put my insertion point in here and Command V, paste. Now I'm just going to hit Command A, and those specs, we go in here. As we said, it's 10. Let's take another look, make sure. It's 12 over 13.5. So it's already 12. We just need to change the leading to 13.5. Okay, that should fit in there pretty good for you. So we'll hit W, take a look at where we are. Okay, looking pretty good. Next, back to our handout. We notice here we have a black bar with type reversing out and a Schwinn logo. This is a text box. It's a text box filled with black, and then the type is paper or white. So we're going to put a text box in there. You can see the type is 10 over 12. Okay. Notice the text box goes right to our ruler guides that we placed in there. So we can just draw that text box with a type tool. And I'm just going to start here. And I'm going to drag all the way over to the edge. Okay, there's my text box. And I'm going to copy and paste this type into there. So I'll highlight it, Command X or Command C, copy. And I'll click back in here and Command V, paste. Okay, so we got it in there. Now let's take a look at our handout again. Notice this type is centered up and down, okay? and then it's over about an inch from the left. So to get something centered up and down inside a text box, that's text frame options. I showed you that in a demo for ignoring text wrap. And the shortcut key for that is Command B. So I just want to select the text box and hit Command B. Here's our text frame options. We use this a lot in here. And we're looking at vertical justification. Vertical is up and down. So I'm going to put that on centered. And you can see it's centering it up and down. See, that's what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and OK that. Now, as I said, this type, back to our handout, it comes over at 1 inch, okay? So to move that over, I'm going to use my left indent. So I'm basically just going to select my text. And on my control panel, go to the paragraph part. And this is left indent. I'm just going to put 1 inch in there, and that kicks it over where it needs to be. Okay. The next thing what we need to do is we're going to make that type white, and there's no such thing as white ink. It's just not done, and inks are transparent. You can do it in some occasions, but it's very difficult. So anytime you have white, basically you're looking at the paper. It's the white paper coming through. So you notice there's no white in here. So we're going to go paper for that. And then I'm going to make the text box black. So I have it selected. And I'm going to click on the fill here, fill and stroke, just like in Illustrator, and make that black. And now we can see our type. Okay, it's looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and Command S that, get it saved. And the last thing we need to do is bring in this Schwinn logo. Take a look here. So here it is, and it's scaled at 50%. Okay, and also you notice here it gives you the specs for this black text box. Okay, but you can draw it right to the guides and you'll be fine. So, and notice something there. Mine is wrong. It needs to bleed off on this side, or start on this edge and stop over here. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. And basically I'm just going to get it selected and pull him over to here, and then bring him in to here. Take a look again. Not quite. Bring it in one more. Into the guide. There we go. And we'll hit W, preview. Okay, that's where we want it. And the last thing is to bring in that Schwinn logo. So I'm going to make another rectangle frame for it. Like this. I'll hit Command D, file place. Going to get the Schwinn EPS. Okay, and it also tells us on our handout it needs to be at 50%. We're going to scale it down. So I'm going to take my direct selection tool so I can get my brown bounding box. I'll go up here on my control panel and type in 50 and hit return. Now we've got it the size we want it. At this point I can just use my nudge arrows and kind of nudge him down and over because my picture box is big enough to contain it. Something like that. Okay. And we're done with this text box. I can also pull this text box in a little bit. Doesn't need to be out there all the way. Okay. And let's preview again. And there we are. So that's how you go ahead and build your bike ad in InDesign.